Hi, good morning everyone. This is the first YouTube video of 2025. I won't wish you Happy New Year because I'm sure you have received lots and lots of Happy New Year wishes, and I'm not the type of person who believes that just because the clock automatically turns from 2024 to 2025 that things will be better. I believe that 2025 is most likely going to be the same as 2024, as bad or as good as 2024, as 2024 was as good as bad as 2023, and so on and so forth. So, no New Year wishes from myself. I'm Teng Boo, I'm from Capital Dynamics, and I hope that you stay throughout this particular video because the contents are amazing. The contents will shock you. I love to shock you all, if you follow me long enough. But they're based on facts, solid research, very difficult research. So if you like that kind of videos where we don't just talk about any kind of fairy tales, then stay to the end, and better still, subscribe. Be our YouTube subscriber so that you get to be notified as and when we have great topics. And you notice that our topics are not your usual run-of-the-mill topic. We don't tell you how to make a lot of money within 1 week. We don't tell you, our topics are pretty serious, but I think they would be very useful for you to become a lot more aware, a lot more knowledgeable of the issues, contemporary issues that are affecting not just Malaysia, but throughout the whole world. So today is part 3. Remember, we ran part 1 a few weeks ago on what made America great, and part 1 we talk about how America is a smuggler nation. America basically smuggle everything. Smuggle as not just as in smuggle, but copy, steal, borrowed, and so on. And part 2, we shared with you how the founding fathers of America, the John Adams, the George Washington, the Benjamin Franklin, copied and borrowed liberally from China, from Confucius, to establish the solid foundation of America, not just economic-wise, but political-wise. Today, part 3, we will share with you what America's might owes Adolf Hitler. Yes, Adolf Hitler, the famous Hitler from the Second World War of Germany. So this is why you find that what I'm going to share with you is going to shock many of you. Let's move on. First, what is Nazi? It's a short acronym for National Socialist German Workers' Party, right? And it was founded in 1919 and renamed in 1920. 1921, the infamous Adolf Hitler became its leader. The ideology is fascism, racism, anti-communism, and so on and so forth. Associated with Nazism What does it mean to be a Nazi war criminal? German individuals who committed war crimes or crimes against humanity under the Nazi regime from 1933 to 1945. And these are the crimes that they commit are genocides, like Holocaust, war crimes, wars of aggression, any type of crimes against humanity. Examples would be the mass extermination of Jews, disabled individuals, enslavement, torture, the list goes on. As you can see on the photos on your right side, the photos that we show is definitely not exhaustive. And for those of you who might be interested and who may think that, well, you know, Adolf Hitler, Nazis never going to come back again, we have all learned our lessons. Human beings don't learn lessons, they always repeat mistakes of the past. Because, unknown to many of you, Adolf Hitler was elected in democratic Germany. Germany at that time was a democracy, and Adolf Hitler was democratically elected. Right? Important fact, right? Okay, let's move on to the topic of the day. This book on my left-hand side, Operation Paperclip, written by a brilliant author, Annie Jacobsen. So this is a book about Operation Paperclip. It's not an easy book to read. Not because it is badly written, it is extremely well written, but because the book is difficult to read because it's got a lot of German names and a lot of facts. And the facts are all connected somehow in so many different ways, at so many different levels. So it's a very important book, difficult book to read. So I'll try for today's YouTube video to bring up the key points. Of course, I would definitely recommend you to go and buy and read the book yourself. And underline, if you underline the book, most likely you underline the whole book because it's so important. So Operation Paperclip what is it about? It's a post-World War II US intelligence program that illegally brought Nazi scientists, German scientists to America under secret military contracts. The program had a very benign, friendly public face and a classified body of secrets and lies. Right? So under this program, America brought more than 1,600 of Hitler's top scientists, top technologists, top doctors to become America's own people. From here you realize that Germany, under Hitler at that time, was actually the military superpower because Hitler was crazy about technology. The operation began in May of 1945. The scientists, the Nazi scientists who helped Adolf Hitler wage World War II, continued their weapons-related work for the United States government, developing rockets, chemical and biological weapons, aviation, space medicine, for example, for enhancing military pilot and performance of astronauts, and many other armaments at a very feverish and paranoid pace that came to define the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union. The age of weapons of mass destruction had just begun, and these two countries, these two superpowers were engaging in a game of brinkmanship. That means they will pursue dangerous policy to the limits, to the extreme limits before stopping. And hiring dedicated Nazis, many of whom are war criminals, by America was without precedent, entirely unprincipled, and inherently dangerous. Not just because it was working with the enemies, right? But as Under Secretary of War Robert Patterson said, It was dangerous because it was opposite to the ideals of democracy. These are some of them. It's a long list. These are just a few of the 1,600 plus German scientists. Below are the Nazi leaders. Adolf Hitler, of course, Himmler and Göring. Himmler and Göring were Hitler's top lieutenants, right? Working side by side with Hitler throughout the whole World War II. 15 of the 21, this I'm referring to the scientists, were dedicated members of the Nazi Party. 10 of them also joined the ultra-violent, ultra-nationalistic Nazi Party military squad called the Stormtroopers, and the SS. The SS were the secret police, and 2 of them wore the Golden Party badge, which means that the Adolf Hitler favored them. 6 of the 21 stood trial at Nuremberg, that is the famous war trial. And 7 scientist was released without trial under mysterious circumstances. So one was convicted of mass murder and slavery and so on, and was granted clemency after serving some time in prison, and after that this convicted scientist was hired by the US Department of Energy. The Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, was created solely and particularly to recruit and hire the Nazi scientists and place them on weapons projects, in scientific intelligence programs within the Army, the Navy, the US Air Force, and the CIA, which was established in 1947. The Joint Intelligence Committee, or JIC, remains the least known and the least studied US intelligence agency of the 20th century. In other words, the JIC works in mysterious ways. By then, after World War II, around World War II, the United States was 20 years behind Germany in rocket development. Colonel Treacher, chief of US Army Ordnance Rocket Branch, and his team would capture these rockets and everything related to them from Germany and ship them back to the United States. The oldest division in the United States Army when they went into Germany after the defeat of Hitler, unexpectedly found the most scientifically advanced aeronautics laboratory in the world. It was called the Hermann Göring Aeronautical Research Center at Wolkenrot. When this American officer Pat learned from Wolkenrot's director Adolf Bussmann that the sound barrier had already been breached by German scientists in their German wind tunnels, Mr. Pat was amazed. American officer Mr. Pat knew immediately that this test facility in Germany had the most superb instruments and test equipment in the world, and that these Nazi scientists would be of immense value in America's jet engine and airplane development program. So the officer Pat oversaw the massive airlift of German aircraft and rocket parts from Wolkenrot to the United States. 5,000 scientific documents were also shipped. At the same time, it's not just aircraft and so on. A menacing new breed of chemical weapons have been discovered. No chemical this dangerous to man had ever been developed before. This was developed by the German scientists. And at that time, the CIOS agents, CIOS stands for Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee on the American side. They did not know about this yet, but the nerve agent was the Tarbon gas. Dachau, which is, I hope I pronounce it correctly, is a German district, is the first Nazi concentration camp, was also a model for Nazi medical research program involving German doctors who would later become part of Operation Paperclip. The work that was performed in experimental cell block number 5 was science without conscience. It was bad science for bad objectives. That at least 6 Nazi medical doctors involved in the research at Dachau would be among the first scientists given contracts by the US Army, will become one of the darkest secrets of Operation Paperclip. In Paris, another American officer, Staver, sat down and wrote a cable that would have a huge impact on the Nazi scientist program. He says, we have in custody over 400 top research development personnel of Peenemünde, developed V2. V2 is the rocket that Germany developed at that time that Hitler used to launch and attack Britain with a lot of V2. London was bombarded by V2 rockets. The thinking of the scientific directors of this group is 25 years ahead of the United States. Later version of V2 would permit launching from Europe to the United States. The impact of such a technological research program. So no wonder Staver says immediate action recommended to prevent the loss of this group to other interested parties. Urgent request reply as early as possible. That means he wanted approval from the American government to take action on this scientists. So in the end, Major Staver succeeded in secretly shipping out enough parts to reassemble 100 V2 rockets in America. At that time, V2 rockets were ahead of any country in the world. America was not a military power like Germany, not yet. And then you have the Hitler's doctors. There's this journal called Aviation Medicine, which is sponsored by the Nazi Party. The US Army, the Air Force, would circumvent copyright law, translate the German work into English, and republish it for their own American flight surgeons to study. Areas in which the Nazi scientists were known to be breaking new ground were air-sea rescue programs, high-altitude studies, decompression sickness studies. So all this would be to make sure that their air force and their military would be ahead of anyone else. German doctors, Nazi doctors were supposedly leading the world's research into how pilots can perform in extreme cold, extreme altitude, and extreme speeds. Remember earlier, the Americans found out that Germany had wind tunnels, test facilities that can make planes fly faster than the speed of sound. You know, the Germans were again ahead of everybody at that time. There was equipment that American doctors had never seen before. Items that included a Nagel anomaloscope, a Zeiss-made interferometer, and an Engelken-Hartung adaptometer, a Schmidt-Hansch photometer, and a precision-built Siemens electron microscope, with which they used to study night vision, blood circulation, G-forces, and so on. So these doctors, these German doctors, as you can see, some of them on the left-hand side. So instead of firing these physicians suspected of heinous war crimes, the center in America kept the doctors under its employment, and the list was classified. That means ordinary Americans did not know that this was happening. Operation Paperclip was transitioning from initially a temporary program to almost a permanent long-term program. Former enemies of the state, that means the Nazi scientists, would now be eligible for the coveted US citizenship.
Are you tired of doing investment research on stock markets? Want to spend time on your hobbies or go out with your friends instead? Introducing iCapital, where you can get independent, objective, and comprehensive investment advice on the go. Available in English and Mandarin and can be accessed via app, website, and print copy. We provide thorough, first-hand research-based findings on listed companies, economies, and stock markets, and clear perspective of how markets interact and how they influence investments, as well as provide Malaysian and global stock recommendations, stock portfolios with outstanding performance to follow. Subscribe now to iCapital for stock news. From only 49 ringgit a year, start investing like a fund manager. Subscribe now at www.icapital.biz.
If any of these activities under the Operation Paperclip were to come to light, that means if the public, the American public, were to know about this, that the US Army, the US Air Forces had been hiring war crime suspects and that they had been conducting military research at a facility inside Germany which was expressly prohibited by the Allied forces. This particular institute, called the Harry Armstrong Institute, would be shut down immediately. Operation Paperclip would be exposed and the US Army would have an international scandal on its hands. It's not just the illegal hiring of all these Nazi scientists, but the American government took the trouble of portraying, giving a false appearance. For example, for various press events, the US Army provided photographs of some of the more wholesome-looking German scientists. No, not those scientists where you have a scar or something like that. Wholesome-looking German scientists. And there were pictures of white-haired men playing chess, window shopping outside a town in Ohio, toy store, smoking cigarettes, and bathing in the sun on army grounds. It was giving you a false picture. And to be invited to the open house, a news reporter had to agree in advance to clear his or her story with the US Army censors before it can be published. Right? The US military placed its own article in the Stars and Stripes purporting to tell the official story that none of the Germans had ever been Nazi, that the men were under strict supervision when they're in the United States, that they were outstanding scientists and technologists, and they were moral family men. So a picture, a perception of clean German scientists was being sent out to the American public. Albert Einstein, when Operation Paperclip became known, was the most extreme figure to publicly denounce Operation Paperclip. He said, "We hold these individuals to be potentially dangerous. Their former eminence as Nazi Party members and supporters raises the issue of their fitness to become American citizens and hold key positions in American industrial, scientific, and educational institutions." When reporters began searching for leads about the individual scientists' wartime activities, that effort proved to be almost impossible because the whole program was classified. In 1947, the CIA was born, July. In Operation Paperclip, the CIA found a perfect partner in its quest for scientific and military intelligence. And it was in the CIA that Operation Paperclip found its strongest supporting partner yet. There was a particular biological program which was run by a group called Special Operations Division, or SO Division, which was fueled by Operation Paperclip. And this biological weapons program would develop into one of the most controversial and collaborative efforts in the history of the CIA. By the spring of 1948, this was about 3 years after the end of World War II, half of the 1,000 German scientists bound for America had arrived in America. Not a single one of them had a visa. In other words, they entered America secretly and illegally. To write this book, to compile the information, to get the facts, Amy Jacobson filed dozens of requests under America's Freedom of Information Act. Some of the requests were honored, many of the requests were denied, and most of the requests were still pending. This book was published in 2014. So, what's the big deal about freedom of information when you can't get the information that you wanted? Some of the Nazi scientists that were brought to America, we obviously cannot show you the whole list. This is only about less than 20. There were about more than 1,600 of them. So what I'll do is I won't go through all of them because it will take days and weeks to complete them. I'll just share with you a few of the notable Nazi scientists that were brought to America. Von Braun is probably the most famous. When he was in Germany, he was technical director of the V-weapons development for the German army and head of this Mittelbau Dora planning office, which was a division within the SS. SS was the secret police of the Nazi party. For 15 years after World War II, von Braun would work with the United States Army in the development of ballistic missiles. Under Operation Paperclip, he worked for the US Army in Fort Bliss, Texas. Then he was working on rockets for the US military, launching them in New Mexico. In 1950, von Braun's team would move to Alabama, where they would build the Army's Jupiter ballistic missile. In 1960, his rocket development center transferred from the Army to the newly established NASA, and he received a mandate to build the gigantic Saturn rockets. Accordingly, von Braun became director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and the chief architect of the Saturn V launch vehicle. This is the super booster that will allow Americans to land on the moon. Von Braun and Dornberger, another Nazi scientist, were not captured. They were so confident of their future use to the US military that they actually turned themselves in when the US Army was in Germany. Second Lieutenant Walter Jessel's first and most lasting impression of von Braun was the lack of remorse. There is the recognition of Germany's defeat, but none whatsoever of Germany's guilt and moral responsibility. Another observer noted, if we hadn't caught the biggest scientist in the Third Reich, the biggest scientist meaning von Braun, if we hadn't caught the biggest scientist in the Third Reich, we had certainly caught the biggest liar. That's how bad it is. By the end of January 1946, 160 Nazi scientists had been secretly moved to America, right? And the single largest comprised 115 of the rocket specialists at Fort Bliss, Texas, led by von Braun. So abundant were the German documents that more than 100,000 technical words were added to the Air Material Command's English language dictionary. 100,000 technical words. That's a lot. Army intelligence officer reviewing the security reports of certain scientists would secretly attach a paperclip to the files of the troublesome cases. So from then onwards, this Nazi scientist program became known as Operation Paperclip. That's how the name Paperclip came about, because the American intelligence officer would put a paperclip to whichever file that they found to be troublesome. ICBM, you may not know what it is. It stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. It is the true revolutionary military offspring of Hitler's V-2 rocket. ICBMs have ranges from 6,000 to 9,300 miles. In other words, an ICBM can reach any target almost anywhere in the world. And because they are powerful, they are deadly, they can travel so far at a high speed, ICBMs are considered a strategic defensive weapon. Von Braun became the biggest celebrity of the Operation Paperclip scientists. He became one of the most prominent advocates for space exploration in the United States during the 1950s, writing numerous articles. And von Braun even served as a spokesman for 3 of Walt Disney's television programs on space travel. In 1960, von Braun and a group of about 120 Operation Paperclip scientists, engineers, and technicians were transferred to the newly established NASA with a mandate to build the Saturn rockets designed to take men to the moon. And like his other German counterpart Dornberger, von Braun carefully worked to whitewash, to cover up his Nazi past. Because if the American public had known of von Braun's role in Hitler's army, NASA's moon program would have never survived. There was actually a motion inside Gerald Ford's White House to award von Braun the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I cannot tell you how hideous, how deceptive, how hypocritical this whole program is all about. And this is what made America great. Kurt Debus, and he was a flight test director and member of the SS, right? He's a flight test director of the V weapons, the rocket weapons, and he would turn a colleague over to the Gestapo, the German secret police, for making anti-Nazi remarks. He served together with von Braun in Fort Bliss, Texas, and Kurt Debus became the first director of NASA's John F. Kennedy Space Center in Florida. He supervised development and construction of rocket launch facilities at Cape Canaveral for the Redstone, Jupiter, Jupiter-C, Juno, and Pershing military configurations from 1952 to 1960. Under his leadership, NASA and its team of contractors built what was hailed as the Free World's Moonport, the launch complex, as well as tested and launched the Saturn family of rockets for the Apollo and Skylab programs. The National Space Club Florida Committee, one of the 3 committees of the National Space Club in Washington, D.C., gave a prestigious space-related award called the Dr. Kurt Debus Award. This annual award was given in honor of Kurt Debus, who was part of the Operation Paperclip program. Kurt Debus is a scientist who during the war was an enthusiastic member of the SS, wore the SS uniform to work, and handed over one of his colleagues for making anti-Nazi remarks and for failing to give Debus the Nazi salute. Right? Under Operation Paperclip, Kurt Debus worked on missiles for the Army, for NASA, for a total of 28 years, most of which alongside his German Nazi colleague Arthur Rudolf and von Braun. A third example of a German top Nazi scientist, Major General Walter Dornberger. He was the wartime German general in charge of weapons development and the technical staff officer in the Nordhausen slave labor tunnels. Germany used a lot of slaves during the war period for a lot of experiments, for a lot of testings in a very cruel manner. Major General Walter Dornberger was arrested by the British for war crimes and later released into US custody. Under Operation Paperclip, he worked for the US Air Force and then the Bell Aircraft Corporation, developing guided missiles, including Bell's ASM-A-2. That is the world's first guided nuclear air-to-surface missile developed for US Strategic Air Command. He played a major role in the creation of America's X-15 aircraft, was a key consultant for the Boeing X-20 Dinosaur project, and until the late 50s, he acted as a missile and space-based weapons consultant to America's Joint Chiefs, carrying a top-secret clearance and visiting the Pentagon in Washington frequently. It could be said that Major General Walter Dornberger remained true to his totalitarian-leaning principles. His beliefs that democratic ideals and traditions could be ignored for military supremacy. That the US Army condoned Dornberger's idea appears never to have been made public before. His speech was presented to the Ordnance Department officials at the Pentagon. Within 2 years of his arrival in US, Dornberger had been transformed from public enemy, public menace to American celebrity. In 1950, he left military custody at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to work for Bell Corporation in New York, before quickly becoming Vice President and Chief Scientist of Bell Aircraft Corporation. His vocation was now to serve as America's mouthpiece for the urgent need to weaponize space. And as I said, he was given top secret security clearance and a job consulting with the military on rockets, missiles, and the future of US space-based weapons. So those are 3 Nazi scientists. It's too long to share with you with all of them or with more, but please buy the book, read it for yourself. And then you realize that much of America's technological prowess, a lot of America's military might, is owed to Adolf Hitler. Because it was under Adolf Hitler that developed Germans' technology and scientific prowess. And America, well, as usual, America, the greatest hypocritical country in the world, secretly stole Hitler scientists to America without telling the American public. So this is part 3 of why America is a great country. When you know the truth, then you realize that whatever Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Obama are talking about are all full of shit, are all full of bullshit. So, like I said, in my YouTube, I give you the facts. The facts were researched by Annie Jacobson. It took her a long time to write this book. It took her a lot of trouble. But she did it. And I really enjoyed the book. It shocked me a lot because I did not realize that it was so bad to such an extreme. Well, continue watching us because we still have part 4 of how America became great. And I'm pretty sure you enjoy part 4. With that, I hope you have a good weekend and stay safe. Bye-bye.